Well, this week we've been observing Entrepreneur Month, and we've been focusing on the celebrations or rather the achievements of entrepreneurs across the broader landscape of specialities. And while this is going on, entrepreneurs can innovate themselves to become top brands. But then how can that be achieved? We've got business consultant and author Douglas Kruger to tell us more about this. Douglas, thank you very much for coming to our program.
Such a great pleasure.
Yeah, well, let's lay the basis of this foundation. We have this trend of some businesses being one-day wonders, and after that, after a while, they are unheard of. Tell us about the kick-off and how they fall.
Absolutely. And what are we after? We're after sustainability and we're after long-term growth. And there are different ways of looking at that. Most entrepreneurs really believe that if you grow massive numbers from the word go, you are winning. And a lot of thinking these days goes against that and says that's not necessarily the way of looking at it. There's a fabulous new book by Simon Sinek called The Infinite Game. And he argues the point that rapid growth right up front is not necessarily your best metric. You want to be able to last for the long term. And that's a whole different way of looking at it. And at the simplest level, he says, people who play a finite game are trying to please their shareholders quickly. And that's a dangerous game to play. Entrepreneurs who play the infinite game are trying to change something in the world. They're not necessarily chasing sales desperately day by day. They are mission-oriented. And that's quite a mouthful to begin with, but that's a good starting point. We want to know how you can achieve longevity and what your mission in the world is, rather than simply how you can make a quick buck.
Yeah, so thinking, creativity, and also how one can enter the market is something that many people are not skilled at, because you'll remember that it takes a problem and an idea for one to be able to be an entrepreneur to solve a problem. But you'll find that some people call themselves entrepreneurs, whereas they are market players. They are actually jumping on the bandwagon of businesses that already exist. So let's take, for example, being a plumber or a carpenter or entering the restaurant business. When you get there, how do you actually make yourself to be sustainable?
It's a great question. And in fact, I love that you begin with the idea of the thinking, because a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners get so caught up in the latest fad, the latest trend, the latest technology. I mean, right now it's fourth industrial revolution and AI, and people are running around as though they're on fire saying, what do we do with this? And it's actually the wrong question. The question is, how do we serve our customers? And if AI helps you to do that, then by all means, wonderful. But if it doesn't, then you are chasing a fad for the sake of the fad, and that's not what we're after. So as you rightly suggest, the thinking is what we're interested in. And those skills of thinking are what I try to teach in the books and the videos and so forth. And what we're after here is the kind of mindset that says, forget the idea of just quickly starting a business and quickly making a buck. What are we accomplishing in the universe? And there's something a bit more noble about that, and it is more bulletproof. So when you start to look around and say, what do I change in the world? That's very different to saying, can I be a plumber? Can I start a restaurant? And you mentioned the restaurant one as well. One of the great mistakes we see so often is the entrepreneur who is so desperately involved in the mechanics of running their business that they essentially become the chef in their own restaurant. We see that so often. You actually need different skill sets and different types of thinking at different stages in the business growth. So if, for example, as you suggest, you're going to start a restaurant, first off, you need to understand the basics of getting a business going. But once it's up and running, you actually have to extract yourself from that business and be the leader, not an employee in it. So it's a whole different skill set.
But there are many restaurants, and when it comes to differentiation, how does one come up with a good idea? Because even just 2 weeks ago, there was a new restaurant opening, and it was targeting high-end market in a low-performing economy.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in fact, the question that you ask, most entrepreneurs don't. What they will do is they'll say, how do I run a restaurant? Or they'll say, how do I make sure my quality is good enough? Now, good enough quality is an excellent metric, but it doesn't make you stand out. The answer I hear most often when I ask, especially a young entrepreneur, what makes you distinctive, what makes you memorable, is they will say something about quality or reliability. Worst one I've ever heard was, I answer the phone within 2 rings. Well, that's great, but so what? It's not something I remember. When you think about a memorable, distinctive brand, take something like Harley Davidson as a very clan-building brand. It's not about how fast they answer the phone. Sure, you expect the professionalism, you expect the good levels of service and so forth, but it is not at all what you think of when you think Harley. You think of American dream, freedom, midlife crisis, whatever the case might be. But there is a brand narrative and a message going on there. So the critical question is, how do we think in terms of theatre? And theatre, I think, is the key to this one. It's not necessarily just about how excellent your business is, it's how distinctive it is. Now, you can actually make the mistake of focusing too much on quality at the cost of distinctiveness.
But why is it that we have people who call themselves entrepreneurs only becoming entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
And they also want to jump on the bandwagon of existential business models,
Yes.
whereas they're not coming up with anything new.
Yeah.
For example, they want to capitalize on the catering business because they can get a tender from government,
Yeah.
and they also want to supply stationery, and they call themselves business people, whereas it's the middleman approach.
Yes, yeah. And we have this fascination with titles. Everybody loves a title. Look at me, I am the Grand High Mullah. And it actually gets in the way. We are supposed to be customer-oriented. Having grand titles is very much self-serving and really impresses no one but yourself and perhaps your wife or your husband. What we really want to do is ask ourselves, how do we serve people in very real ways? You mentioned the idea of the entrepreneurs going into the world of tenders and so forth. There are some simple metrics to look at in terms of who's likely to succeed and who's likely to fail. And you often find that people involved in the world of tenders have never been in, say, the world of catering. Let's say there's a big catering deal up for grabs. They understand the world of tenders, but not the world of catering. The chances of that working are remarkably small. So turning that round in terms of how do you look at that practically as an entrepreneur? Say you're quitting your job and you want to start a new business, and you've discovered that there is a tiling business up for grabs, you want to buy it. My first question to you is, have you ever done tiling before? Because if not, you're not going to predict the problems, you're not going to see the issues coming. Or at the very least, are you extraordinarily good at managing people who understand tiling? If those two things are not in place, the chances of that business failing are 99.9. You mentioned earlier a stat, I think you said 1,000 doors have closed from January to July. And that's always the gap in knowledge. We talk about funding being the great thing, it's terribly important, but without the knowledge, it doesn't matter how much you have in the way of cash reserves.
Right, so as we wrap Entrepreneur Week, just a parting shot for young people out there who want to get into business.
Okay, what is the most important thing? From the highest level right down to the lowest level, whether you are leading a multinational brand or trying to escape poverty, there is one quality above all that will get you to the next level, and that is trustworthiness. If you're a multinational brand that says, our goal is to promote health, but you're selling cigarettes in your store, you are betraying trust. If you are a first-time entry-level worker, it's your first job, and instead of repaying that trust with excellence, you take shortcuts, you steal something here or there, you do not get to graduate to the next level. The universe gives you a trust test. It applies at the bottom, it applies at the top. Pass the trust test, you get to graduate.
Yeah, well, there's so much to talk about, especially, your concept of ignorance is your strategy. But I believe that will be a topic for another day, because some people have been saying ignorance is bliss, but hey, what you don't know may not kill you, and what if it does,
Yes,
yeah, the world of business does require knowledge, so we will pick up from the issue
Lovely.
of ignorance being a strategy. Okay, Douglas Kruger is a business consultant and also an author, and of course we're going to take a break. When we return, Peter will take you on with the headlines. It's always a pleasure doing business with you.